Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. We hope everyone's had a great week so far. Today, we're going to be talking about from zero to MVP, how we can turn ideas into working products in 2025. Before we start and introduce our subject matter expert and speaker for today, what we're going to be learning in today's webinar is you're going to be learning about what is MVP, what actually is, and what actually it isn't. You're going to also be able to discover the 4 parts of every MVP must include, how to use a journey map to design a real user flow, and how to set metrics that matter and ignore the ones that don't. But before we introduce our subject matter expert, we do want to have some housekeeping items we just want to go over real quickly here. Again, we will be making this interactive throughout today's hour that we'll be together here. So in the right-hand side, you can see where there will be questions and people submitting their comments. That is in the chat feature there. Feel free to let us know first where you're from. So if wherever you're from, you could put that here in the chat. And if there's any questions, I will be reading those questions off to our subject matter expert, who will then share that information and answer it for you. So again, please take advantage of that. And again, we're here to not only share knowledge, but actually for you to be a part of the experience. So please be interactive, be a part of today's experience, and we will make sure we get all those questions answered for you. And without further ado, we're going to be talking to Tristan Kromer. Tristan is the founder and CEO at Kromatic. And a little bit about Tristan before we start. He is an innovation coach and founder of Kromatic. Tristan has worked up and down the innovation stock, helping innovation teams and leaders create amazing products and build startup ecosystems. An experienced startup entrepreneur and corporate product manager, Tristan has helped leaders set up innovation boards to fund strategic projects, coach governments developing innovation ecosystems, analyzed innovation portfolios, and led disruptive innovation teams and trained coaches worldwide. He has helped a wide range of organizations create and grow their innovation programs, from nonprofits such as Child Fund Cancer Research, UK Kiva, in government agencies like in the US and UK, to the same of the biggest brands on the planet, that being Unilever, Target, Salesforce, Walmart, LinkedIn, just to name a few. Tristan has worked with more than 30 technology accelerators, including Innovation Norway, Vinnova in Sweden, and Enterprise Ireland, Nest Up in Belgium, Start Smart in Estonia, and the Innovation Partnership Program, which was in Vietnam, Finland. And with his remaining hours, Tristan provides free consulting to entrepreneurs in early stage startups. Truly amazing. And without further ado, we welcome Tristan Kromer to the stage. Tristan, how you doing today?
Awesome. Thank you, Christopher, for the very nice introduction. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Karen from Nigeria. It's nice to see some international people on the call. I'm living in San Francisco, but right now I'm in New York City, which is my hometown. And as I'm a resident of New York, I do want to encourage you again, as Christopher said, I'm very comfortable with people yelling at me, interrupting me on the street. That is kind of a New York way of saying hello. So the most important thing for me today is to tell you something that is useful. So if I say something that you don't understand or you disagree with, or you think, oh, that sounds really cool for a tech company, but does it really matter for a services company or a nonprofit or a physical good? Please shout it out in the chat. I want you to challenge me. Like my pledge to you is to tell you the truth of kind of what I've seen, what works, what doesn't work, what's realistic. And I need you to challenge me and tell me what is the most relevant thing for you? What is your situation? Where is your company? Have you already built a product? Have you already released it? Do you have traction? Do you have nothing? Do you have just an idea? I'm going to try and get into as much that is specific to you as possible. So shout it out in the chat, and Chris is going to help me out by reading out those messages and interrupting me when feasible. That said, let's get right into it, because the term MVP has been around for a very long time. It was originally coined in 2001 by Frank Robinson, but the term, it was really popularized by Eric Ries in his 2011 book, The Lean Startup. And nowadays in Silicon Valley and among the rest of the world, the term is almost commonplace, but a lot of people don't really understand kind of what it is. So I do want to dig into it. Chris has already covered the agenda. He's already said plenty about me and my team. So I'm going to skip past, the NASCAR logos here, which are meant to make me look very impressive. So that's awesome, but that's not what you're here to see. So I want to get right into kind of what is an MVP and what isn't it, because it's not just a buzzword. It's not just the thing that you say when you're creating your first product. Generally, there's a lot of misconceptions about MVPs, and it's looked at as just another, at this point, another corporate buzzword. It's not even a startup buzzword. It's like a corporate buzzword. Even governments, you hear talking about MVPs. But an MVP does have a very specific meaning. It's not just a super complicated first prototype of your product that is usually unnecessarily overbuilt. That is often what it is, but that's not what it is. It's not what it should be. It's also not kind of just building every feature that your early customers tell you to build. That's what creates, the famous Homer car, or, what we call Frankenstein products. An MVP is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. That is the technical definition that Eric Ries gave. But even when he came out, there were hundreds of people with opinions and consultants who defined it this way and that way and gave examples that were often contradictory and confusing. So I'm going to give some very practical points here. This is not an MVP, right? The Segway, when it first came out, was widely hyped as this thing that was going to completely revolutionize all transportation. People were going to have to redesign cities around it because everybody would be riding around on Segways. And it was much, much hyped. And it was a complete product with all the bells and whistles they thought everybody would absolutely love and need to have. And it was, as I hope everyone knows, a colossal failure in that regard. It was meant to be for everyone, and it turned out to be mostly useful for mall cops and tourists. So kind of a very broad use case of a very full-featured, fully functioning product turned out to be way, way overbuilt and way, way overhyped. And the same can be true of a lot of products that are released into the mainstream. One of my favorites is, of course, Google Glass. Google Glass, of course, another colossal failure of a truly overbuilt product that missed a fundamental piece of reality about what people actually wanted. And those two products all turns out have the same critical weakness in the actual market, and that is that people don't want to look like idiots. Right? Like fundamentally, no one wanted to walk around with Google Glass, and no one wanted to ride on a Segway because they didn't want to look stupid. Like it wasn't about the technology, it wasn't about the feature set, it wasn't about your grand vision for transforming cities or, doing away with the cell phone. It's about what people actually want and what they're willing to pay for. And in this case, nobody wants to pay to look like an idiot. That is a fundamental nature of human beings. Similarly, there are physical good products which are kind of fully launched into the market with advertising campaigns and things backing them with money spent. Things like the Colgate beef lasagna, which is definitely not an MVP. That is a fully featured product that somebody really should have thought, wow, this is a terrible idea. These are all product launches that were massive investments of money, just massive investments of money that were absolutely wasted because they were not MVPs, because there was something fundamental about the market that the creators of these products did not understand, and they would have benefited from launching a smaller, more minimal version of their product to understand what the customer actually wanted. And in this case, nobody wants a beef lasagna that makes you think of your toothpaste. Like, that is not a good vibe for lasagna. So, again, a minimum viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So, the classic example of this is Dropbox. Dropbox, a wonderful company, a wonderful unicorn company. If you're not familiar with Dropbox when it was originally released, um, it was not the company it was today with a whole suite of products. It did one thing and it tried to do one thing very well. But when it actually launched, it didn't even do that. They just had a video on a landing page which explained what the product was and had a sign up button. The product itself didn't even exist. It was just this landing page which promised to sync all the files that are on your phone with all the files that are on your computer, or whatever it is you wanted to sync with all the files on your other computer. And just they described it as a magic pocket which always had your car keys in it so that you could never lose the important things that you wanted to carry with you forever. um, that's all it was. It was just a landing page, and that was sufficient for them to get a critical piece of validated learning, of the insights about the customer that they needed, which was, is anybody interested in this thing? Does anybody else have this problem? And in the first month that they launched, they had several 100,000 signups, which at the time was very, very good, very high. It actually went viral, this video. And that gave them the confidence to go and invest a large amount of money in building that product, because at the time it took them almost a year to build it. Nowadays, I would like to talk a bit about the more recent developments in the past 4 months about technology that have really allowed us to accelerate the build process even further, and the dangers of that in regards to building MVPs. But I'm going to save that for a little bit later. I'm going to give you one more example of what I think is an absolutely brilliant MVP, which is this little iron brick. This is a physical product. It was a physical product of a nonprofit company. Um, the challenge that they were facing is they really wanted to cure iron deficiency in developing countries. Turns out in those developing countries, there were people who were lacking sufficient iron in their diet. And they thought, you know what? If we can do that, we're going to solve some anemic problems. We're going to be able to solve a lot of health issues, and we're going to reduce healthcare costs in these countries. So the easiest way to get more iron in your diet is just to literally add iron to your diet. So their solution, their product, if you will, was literally an iron brick that they asked people to drop into their soup. Not into the soup, the bowl that you actually eat. They're not literally asking you to gnaw on a block of iron, but they were asking you to cook your soup with a block of iron in it. The iron would leach out of the soup, and you would get iron in your daily recommended allowance of it. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that nobody wants to put a block of iron into their soup. And when they actually launched their minimum viable product, which was, again, literally this little brick of iron, what they found was when they went to investigate whether or not people were using it, whether people were putting it in their soup, is they actually took this picture, which was people had taken their minimum viable product, the thing that was supposed to make them healthier, and they were using it to prop up various tables, doors, as a doorstop, as a paperweight, in this case, adjusting the height of the table to make it more level. And they were not actually putting it in their soup. Why? Well, basically because iron doesn't belong in soup, right? This is not a thing. This little brick of iron is not something that looks like something you should put into your soup. It looks extremely unappetizing. It's not very natural. So They learned something. They learned something with an initial release of their product that was incredibly simple to produce, and they learned that people were not actually going to use their product in the way that it was intended. So that is a perfect MVP. They released something into the market that was incredibly easy to manufacture, and they learned something about human behavior that they might not have understood. That no one cared so much about getting their recommended supply of iron that they were going to put something that looked unappetizing into their pot of soup. So they redesigned it and they created this. This is Lucky Iron Fish. Right? It is the exact same product. It is a block of iron, but it is shaped like a fish. So it feels more natural to put the Lucky Iron Fish into your pot of fish soup. And lo and behold, people started to use it. It's those sorts of really basic insights which seem very obvious in retrospect. People don't want to look like idiots with Google Glass. People don't want to put blocks of iron into their soup unless it looks like an ingredient. It's these sort of kind of very stupid insights that trip up a lot of companies, particularly tech companies, who tend to be very technology focused and forget about the human being. That is the most unpredictable and risky thing about a new business is how are those human beings going to behave? Are they going to understand the technology that we're putting in front of them? Do they have the needs that we expect them to? These are the challenges that you have to face when you're building a new company, and they're the most critical. So, just another couple of examples of MVPs that are truly MVPs. This is 2 sheets of paper that the company Wealthfront, again, massive company nowadays. I can't remember how many millions or billions of dollars they have uh, under their service, but Wealthfront started with 2 pieces of paper and a human being consulting people on wealth management tactics. That was their first product. And they sold it for $20 a month or something like that, the actual price of their software that would do this instead of the human. But they did it with a human being physically delivering that service to people in person often so that they could get an understanding of what things they liked, what things they didn't, how they understood their finances, and how they wanted to visualize them. And they could do that live with somebody drawing on a piece of paper. And just in case you think that MVPs are not for truly great companies, this, of course, is Apple's famous first computer. And nothing says MVP more than a hand carved block of wood with circuits attached to it. The thing that's important to recognize about you as a startup, even if you're a corporate startup, even if you're a nonprofit that is just trying to save lives, is that your job right now is not necessarily to build something super fancy and impressive. It is not to write lines of code. It is not to invent new technology. It is not to write, God, it's not to write a 100-page business plan. And it's not to create massive spreadsheets projecting your amazing hockey stick growth curve or awesome pretty pixels in your logo. It is about managing risk. Essentially, when you're going from zero to a real product, um, the more time you spend building something, the more cost you're incurring. Right? The more time, the more cost, and the more risk that if you build the wrong thing and make a mistake, you are going to have to go back to zero because your product is going to be so complicated that you don't even know what's not working. You can't even tell what features are maybe too confusing for people or just distracting for people because you packed so many things into it that you just have to take a step back and go back to zero. This is not a good way to build products. What you really want to do is take that grand vision that you have and break it into several small steps so that you can build incrementally and test it with real live customers. And thus, if you make a mistake, you only have to revert a little bit. You just have to go back one step instead of 10. So the idea of creating a minimum viable product is ultimately to reduce risk. And we are reducing risk by learning something. Right? That's what validated learning means. It means we're trying to gather an insight about our customer or our user or our client or our sponsor if you're a nonprofit, something that gives you an insight about what is going to give you a sustainable model for growth, for impact, for revenue, for whatever it is that you're after. And you want to do that with the least amount of effort possible. Essentially, you want to be as lazy as possible and learn the most that you can with the least amount of effort. So, this is all about going around that famous build, measure, learn loop as fast as possible because you want to find a product that fits with the market. And by releasing an early stage or an early version of that product, you're hopefully going to find that the market loves what you're doing, or maybe that there's a smaller segment that is absolutely passionate that you can really double down on and focus on rather than just trying to market the Segway to everyone in the world or Google Glass to everyone in the world. You want to target people who really, really love your product. That is the market you're going after, the one that fits. So, to get a little more tactical here, there are some critical parts to building a minimum viable product that people often forget. So again, we're looking to go around this build, measure, learn loop as fast as possible. So we want to build something, measure what happens when it interacts with real people, learn what works, learn what doesn't work, and then build something better, leaner, cheaper, faster, more amazing, something that works even better, and kind of learn as rapidly as possible. But the right way to go about doing this loop is really not to start by building something, but to start by saying, well, let's just go backwards and say, well, what are the questions that I fundamentally have? What is it that I need to learn? And if I can frame what questions that I have, whether that's a question about, well, who is our target market? What is the price point they are willing to pay? What channels can I use to reach them? What's my go to market strategy? How do they want to receive customer support? Or even, technical feasibility questions like how am I going to implement this product? What sets of data do I need to power my AI application? How can I partner with people to get that data that I need? All of these are valid questions that you can address. And once you have those questions, you can start identifying what is the data set that I actually need to answer that question. Because if your question is fundamentally, do people have this pain point that I think I'm going to solve? You don't really need to build a whole lot to do that. You just need a plan. And in some cases, that plan might just be to go out and talk to human beings, like face to face, over Zoom, whatever you need to do to get the information that you want, to get that data, even if that data is qualitative in nature, just the interview notes. So, what we ideally want to do is we want to go rapidly back and forth around this loop. We want to ask a question, figure out what data we need, create a plan to go get that data, and then build, measure, learn. So, fundamentally, this is all about asking the right questions. Now, in terms of what you need to actually build, it's not just a product, right? If you just build a product, great. That's technology, that's invention. That is important. It's an important part of any business is actually having something that people want, knowing how to build it, the feasibility of building it. But if you don't actually know who that customer segment is and you don't know how to get them to your product, you're not going to get any useful feedback and you're not ultimately going to get around that build, measure, learn loop. So there are 4 different things that you at a minimum have to build when you build a minimum viable product, right? You need to understand and identify who that customer segment is. You need to have a product, have some sort of value proposition that you're going to deliver to that customer, but you also need a channel to deliver that value to the customer. Now, it doesn't need to be a massive channel. Your channel might just be 5 people that you know. It might be 5 businesses that you think could really benefit from your supply chain, software. But you need some way to get that initial feedback to make sure you are building the right thing. And then, of course, you need a relationship with those people, or really a way for them to give you feedback. So if you build a product and then you launch it on Product Hunt and then you hope it got to the customers, if you don't have some way to collect feedback from them, you're not actually getting around that build, measure, learn loop, and you're not learning anything. You need ideally one way for the customer to contact you actively and give you feedback. That includes data analytics on your product. It includes having a nice customer feedback form. It maybe includes um, a support line. And you also ideally need one way for you to actively reach out to your customers and solicit feedback actively. That could be a drip campaign. It could be collecting their email addresses. It could be following them out of the store and asking them how they intend to use your product. But you got to have some way to maintain a relationship with that customer and get feedback from the customer to your value proposition to understand if you built the right thing. So those are the four things you absolutely have to have. And if you don't, you are going to wind up building the segue. And then you're going to quickly discover that a lot of your money has been wasted. So there are a lot of different tools and methods and tips and tricks and things that you can do to get this sort of feedback very, very rapidly. There is a massive list of different approaches that you can use to build a minimum viable product, or basically just to get feedback. I'm not going to go into all of these. That would be way too much. But what I will tell you is that there is an open source free book that you can download from Amazon. You can also download it from my website. That is a collected list of methodologies and approaches that you can use to learn various things. So I'm not going to go into all of these, but I would like to discuss some of them today. But if you want to download that book, again, you can get it off of Amazon.com for free as an ebook. But something like the Dropbox video is a perfect example. Like, this is not a really full-featured product. It doesn't do anything. It was just a video with an email sign-up. But it did have those critical components. It had a value proposition that it was promising to sync your files between computers. It had a customer segment that it was targeting. You know, it was particularly tech users, people who had smartphones and who had large desktops at the time and wanted to sync files between them and always have their files available to them. So it was a very clear job to be done. They had a channel that they were using. In that case, they had a landing page that they were distributing mostly among the tech community initially, and they had that feedback form in that they were collecting email addresses and then could follow up with those people. So it had all the ingredients that you kind of need for an MVP. My only caveat there is that it didn't actually deliver the product. So I do want to focus on the viable part of minimum viable product. Viable means that it can't just be about reducing risk, right? It has to still also deliver the value. So, although Dropbox was one of the most famous MVPs originally, it helped coin the phrase of an MVP. It wasn't really a product that delivered value. It was a landing page and a video. It didn't deliver any of the value that it actually promised. And that's again, totally fine, great way to get validated learning very, very quickly, but I would describe that probably as an experiment, not necessarily a minimum viable product as a whole. A minimum viable product has to, at some point, deliver the value that you are promising, even if it's in a kind of barely sustainable, barely adequate way. It has to be something that's just enough for those early adopters to go like, yeah, this is the thing that I believe is going to help me. Even if it's not perfect right now, I am willing to pay something for this. I may not be willing to pay in dollars. Maybe you're making a social media app. You don't want people to pay directly for that, but they're going to pay with their data. They're going to pay by signing up with their email address and giving you some information. They're going to pay you with time, the time they spend on your app, the attention that they spend on your app, maybe by recommending other people to your app. But they're going to exchange something for the value proposition that you are giving them. That is the key part here, is you need to promise some value, deliver it, and get something in exchange for that. So the best way to do this is to start by using a customer journey map, or sometimes just called journey map, sometimes called a storyboard. And what a journey map or storyboard is it is basically a way of describing how there's an unhappy person and you are going to give them something and you are going to make them happy. It is something that is very grounded in the user experience or the customer experience. It's very human focused. It's not built around the technology that you're delivering. It's built on what people actually want, feel, and will experience while using your product. And this is a great approach for you to start thinking about what you actually need to build before you start building. And it's very, very easy. So I would describe user experience as a person's perceptions and responses that result from the use or anticipated use of a product, service, or system. So the product or the technology that you are going to deliver, that's in terms of a bowl of cereal, that's the Cheerios, the raisins, the milk, the bowl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The user interface, that's just the spoon, right? The user experience is all of those things combined together, but also how the person feels about using that, right? And how the person feels is the most critical thing. So I want to give you one practical example of a wonderful technology, life-saving technology that really benefited from the use of storyboarding to improve it. Now, this is a large company example. Um, I've done a lot of work with startups and large companies. The same tactics apply to large companies that apply to startups. And I really, really love this example because it encapsulates how technology isn't always the answer. It's often something much, much simpler. So GE was putting out some new MRI machines. Obviously, GE was very, very good at technology. You probably have possibly been in one of these in your life. I've been in one a couple times. It is a big piece of technology that is a life-saving piece of technology. But when GE really wanted to help improve the value of this product, what they did is they went back to the basics. They didn't say, like, how can we make the resolution of this camera better? How can we make it operate faster? Because sometimes you got to sit in this thing for 45 minutes. What they said was, where are the places where MRIs are not delivering the value that they are intended to do? And it turns out that MRI machines were having distinct problems delivering value in children's hospitals. In particular, when you start trying to put people like Sophia here, who's 6.5 years old, into an MRI machine, Sophia tends to have some issues. So what they did was they took a prototypical kid, Sophia here, and they started looking at how real kids behaved and interacted with an MRI machine. And in this case, Sophia is just an example. It's a persona, a representation of a group of people that are children that have to go and have an MRI. And what they did is they just observed those children and said, well, where are the problems uh, with using an MRI machine? Because they noticed that these MRI machines that are used in children's hospitals were getting far fewer uses per day than the adult MRI machines. And that was a big problem for these MRIs because they're very expensive. And if hospitals can't get the value out of them by getting as many people through the MRI as possible, they're not going to be able to afford them. So they said, well, why aren't children getting as much use out of this MRI as possible? There are a lot of children that need an MRI. So why is it they're only getting maybe 12 children per day through the MRI machine instead of 24 adults? And by observing them and mapping out step by step what happens in Sophia's complete journey to use the MRI machine, not just in the MRI machine, but before, and how she anticipates using the MRI machine. By mapping that out, they discovered some things. So, first of all, Sophia rides to the hospital, she checks in, and she's got certain people that she's interacting with at that time that might impact how she understands and perceives the value of the MRI machine. She interacts with certain things. The GE team looked and they mapped this entire process, including checking in, walking to the MRI machine, seeing the MRI machine, and then seeing that Sophia and other children like her freaked out. right? They saw the MRI machine and said, I don't want to go into that big, scary machine, which honestly I can sympathize with because they are big, scary, and loud. So they cry, they resist. The doctor has to come in. The doctor has to anesthetize the children, which is not good. That's adding an additional risk factor. It's slowing down the process because they try and get the kid in the MRI machine. Sometimes the kid fidgets and moves, and then the scan has to get restarted. And the kids ultimately wound up having to get drugged and then go through the MRI machine. So that's slowing down the efficiency of the actual product. It's reducing the amount of value that that MRI machine can deliver. So they were able to map out this experience and, of course, actually map out the emotions that the user in this case, not the customer, Sophia is not paying for the MRI machine, but she is the user. And her behavior of getting scared, like her impression of it, was causing an inefficiency in the product. So from that, they could start identifying, well, what does the user, Sophia, actually need in this moment? What is the thing that would actually help this process along? Because if Sophia needs to have that scan, but Sophia also needs to feel safe. And that was not present when you look at this, big scary machine that they have to go in. So um, the thing they have to figure out how to do is make Sophia feel safe so that they don't cry and resist. So again, they wound up not building anything immediately. They didn't try and improve the product. What they did was they talked to people, and in particular, they talked to children. And one of the kids said something really fascinating. One of the kids that actually went into the MRI machine and didn't resist, didn't cry, didn't scream, just kind of sat there quietly and dealt with the situation, said something really interesting. The kid said that he was a little scared at first, but when he looked at the MRI machine, it kind of reminded him of getting into a tent when going to camping. Like it's a small enclosed space, it's not really anything going on. And he thought of it like a tent, and that made him feel a little bit more secure. Okay, great. That's an interesting insight. So, how can you turn this into something that any kid will feel safe and secure getting into? Well, turns out that the answer is not technology, it's paint. Right? This is a good experience. This is a wonderful small feature improvement. It's a minimum viable feature that actually solves the problem. The kids can come into this room and feel like they're going camping and they're just going to go get into a tent. They're not getting into a big, scary machine. They're having fun. Or maybe they're going on a dive expedition or getting into a pirate ship. These solutions, these very low tech solutions to a human problem, is kind of the epitome of what you can do with a cleverly built MVP, whether that's genuinely has to be a technology product or could be two pieces of paper that you're using manually to deliver a service. That's the idea. Figure out the least amount of effort you can to deliver the value in an effective way. And in this case, they were able to massively improve the efficiency of a very high technology product with nothing but a paint job. So this comes from understanding human beings, from mapping out the story of how they use this product, how you believe your product will function. This is a storyboard of Instagram, signing up for a new account, seeing something beautiful, taking a picture, realizing that your pictures are terrible, and giving that photo to an amazing AI editor or filter system that makes your pictures look awesome. And of course, after that, you become wildly famous. Now, this process of creating a journey map is something that anybody can do. It's very simple. You don't need to know how to draw. You can just write down words. You can write down the emotions that people are experiencing at those times, just like the GE team did with Sophia. This is a very easy approach to understand not only what people are going through right now, like what is the actual situation that you're trying to solve, but it's a great way to map out your hypothesis for the product that you want to build and make it very human centered. And this approach of journey mapping or storyboarding turns out to have a lot of other benefits in regards to figuring out what to actually build. Now, again, we're trying to we're trying to learn the maximum amount with the least amount of effort. So if we can take a storyboard like this, this is one for a customer support platform. What we can do is we can look at that story and try and analyze, well, where is the point that we actually deliver the value that a human being really, really wants? And if we can identify that point, where in this case, the person calling customer support is notified that the problem is resolved, and even if we have in mind a whole bunch of features that happen after that, you know what? We don't have to build those right now. That's extra. That is cruft. That is fluff. We need to identify the point where we actually deliver just enough value to get somebody interested in our product. And everything after that is not relevant right now. They may be things that you want to build later, but we want to focus on just enough. Like, what are the minimum steps of that journey that we can actually deliver the value? And then what we can also do is we can start identifying points where human behavior might actually deviate from our expectations. In the case of a customer support journey, it is almost always that a human being calls into the support center and we assume that they're going to be able to describe the problem to the customer support person. They're going to know what computer they're on, what phone they're using, what browser they're using, and honestly, that is almost never the case. Even with well-trained technical human beings, they tend not to really want to bother to look up their operating system and which version of Chrome they're using. They don't like to do that. So what we can do with this journey map is we can start to understand what are the risky points of the journey that we really do need to learn something about, to learn how the human being might actually behave in this situation. And we can look for points in the story where the user has a lot of free will. Those are the risky parts. Right? That's exactly where your product is going to go off the rails because people are using it in a way that you didn't anticipate, like putting your wonderful iron brick under a table instead of into the soup pot, or falling off the Segway as Mr. Bush famously did once. So the other nice benefit of doing a journey map is that you can actually figure out what are the metrics that truly matter for your product. How can you measure and get data that this product is really the thing that is going to deliver value, that's going to drive value for the users or the customers or the sponsors? Doesn't matter if it's for profit, could be the metrics that drive your revenue, could be the metrics that drive CO2 saving or lives saved. I don't care what the product or service is. You ideally want to be able to measure whether or not your business model or your impact model is sustainable. And you can use a story map to do this very effectively, a storyboard. In each of those scenes that you map out, you can easily identify what is happening in this scene. They're taking trips, people are taking pictures, they're seeing great vistas, they're taking pictures, they're rating those pictures, they're applying filters. There are things that are happening in each of these scenes. Sophia's crying, Sophia's going into the MRI machine. These are things that we can observe and witness because we've created a journey map that is very human focused. And this is ideal for starting to measure things. We can identify all the things that happen in each of those scenes, and we can create conversion metrics from one step to the next. This turns out to be a wonderful, wonderful way of starting to build an impact or revenue model to see, well, is my product ultimately going to deliver the value that I want? And hopefully, I'll be able to reinvest whatever revenue or sponsorship money I get back into the product to drive growth or further impact. So even with a very basic journey map where I just have kind of visitors to my website or visitors to my food truck in this case, I get people who are coming to check out my menu, I get people who order, and I get a dollar that people pay me. Now, the conversion rates of the number of people who order divided by the number of people who read the menu, that is my percentage conversion rate from visitors to customers. And my dollars per customer, that's going to be a key metric for me. So it's these conversion rates from step to step in your journey map that we can ultimately use to construct an awesome financial model. So let me just show you the difference between a traditional financial model, something that you might get an investor asking you for. Well, hopefully not a Silicon Valley investor, but sometimes we get in a lot of other locations, we sometimes get these angel investors that expect a 100-page business plan and a financial projection, 5 years out, way up to the year 2028, something like that. The difference between what I'm describing here and a traditional financial model is that all of these metrics are kind of points, right? They're points in time where I'm asked to guess that in 2028, I'm going to earn 3 million in revenue in this case. Okay, that's not a very useful prediction. That's just a random number that I have to pluck out of the air to satisfy some investor, and it's not useful. And it's not useful because there's no way for me to test that assumption until I get to the year 2028. Now, instead of doing that, what I'd like to do again is to have real conversion metrics that are based on user behavior, because I can start measuring those things today with even 100 customers, 10 customers, 5 customers, even a small amount of data and a small amount of customers going through that journey map and kind of walking step by step and seeing their conversion rates. That is something that I can measure today, even if I have a small small sample size and a small margin of error. So what I really want to have is a spreadsheet or something very, very basic, not a huge, complicated, business model that takes you hours and hours to make, something very, very basic, which has those simple metrics like the percentage of visitors that become customers, the revenue per customer, the percentage of customers that return, the percentage of customers that refer a visitor. I can hook these into a spreadsheet with formulas so that I'm not just putting a number into 2026 over here. I have assumptions, and these assumptions are testable. I can also start modifying these assumptions and say, well, what happens if I want to earn $10 million, well, what does my conversion rate need to be? Does it need to be 50%? Does it need to be 40%? Does it need to be 30%? I can actually put those assumptions into the model and project out what might happen. And I can kind of play this little what if game. What are the criteria that I need to be successful? Like if it turns out that I drive 100 people through my product and it turns out that only 25% of people return, that's going to have a really big impact on my total profit and loss per month. If this is real data and I get this information from launching a minimum viable product into the market, that tells me something. It tells me that if I really want to make a large amount of money, I'm going to have to increase my viral coefficient by a huge amount in order to get the type of traction that I really want. Or I might have to crank up the activation rate to get that nice hockey stick. So by creating these hypotheses and mapping them all out from that user journey map, it allows me to construct a very, very simple model that I can use to start playing what if and start understanding what has to be true in order for me to be successful. And that is just an absolute critical part of an MVP. Again, we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn what are the things that are going to make us successful? What are the things that are going to make us fail? And if I actually put in some numbers and start putting in real data, and it turns out that my P&L is flat, or my impact model is flat, or it tapers off at some point, that's important information because it allows you to change your mind, pivot, or go into a different segment, different customer segment. So ideally, you want your P&L or your impact to look like this, but that's not always the way it works. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that nowadays, technology has really, really improved, particularly in the last 4 months. And it's gotten to the point where we can actually do a lot of the stuff that I'm describing to you very, very simply, and even get something that's much more sophisticated than just a straight hockey stick curve, something that'll actually project the probability of learning, of earning a certain amount of money or reducing a certain amount of CO2 in the air or how many lives you're going to save. So I want to show you an example of that really, really quickly, but I do want to emphasize that everything that I'm showing you here is widely free and available. You can Google Journey Map. You can ask your GPT or your favorite LLM about how to make a journey map. It's going to give you very straightforward instructions to do so. There are a large number of templates and available online that you can do that with. We've got a template over at Kromatic.com. You're welcome to download this and use it. It's absolutely free of charge for any startups or early stage products. We can use this to try and identify our protagonist, who we want to target, the channel that we're going to deliver our value proposition to, our value proposition and storyboard, and ultimately our feedback loop. We can also use that to start identifying what I need to build, what are the resources and partners I might need to build, and we can start identifying metrics. However, in the past 4 months, it's become very, very clear that you can do quite a lot of really cool stuff with AI that's pretty neat. And it's accelerated this process radically, not only in terms of building stuff, which I'd love to talk about, but also in terms of even doing storyboarding. So if you want to do something quick and simple, please make a model of a, let's say I like dumplings, so I'm going to make a dumpling food truck. We can use AI tools to accelerate this process radically. We can use it to make basic customer journey maps. We can use it to actually calculate and create business models for us. We can use it to challenge our assumptions. We can even use it to start designing experiments and even getting real data with synthetic people. But in this case, I can just ask an AI to help me make that model of my product. I can even help it to ask an AI to say, can you make me some illustrations? And this is just speeding up the cycle time that we can get through our build, measure, learn loop radically. But there are some caveats and dangers with that. Like in this case, I've just asked an AI to design me a journey map of how my customer wants to experience my product. In this case, again, it's just a dumpling food truck, so it's not really a big deal. I could ask it to generate, fancier images for me and all that. But that's not really the best way to use AI, especially to build a product. You generally shouldn't just be asking AI to do stuff for you. You should really be asking, you should be doing stuff with it. So Karen is asking, can this tool help with business ownership structures? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. That is something you would probably have to negotiate with. The same general rule would apply. Don't trust an AI to do stuff for you. They're very good at coming up with ideas, but they're very good at, if you can prompt it the right way, it's good at challenging you. But what you really need to do is work with it, challenge the assumptions that it's telling you, and ideally take those to an expert to verify things. I myself, I had a 2 to 3 hour argument with an AI about statistics. I thought I was getting a really wonderful expert opinion out of this AI. And I wound up taking the answer to a real statistician, and it turns out that the AI was lacking certain context that really led me astray. Same thing applies to vibe coding, which you might have heard a lot about. There are tools like Cursor. Cursor here, I use this all the time to code up my MVPs. I'm not a great engineer, but with something like Cursor tied into local LLMs, I can generate a really awesome product pretty quickly, sometimes in hours, what used to take days, weeks, or months. But it will lead you astray if you're not really careful and you're not paying attention. So the quick answer here is you got to keep your hands on the wheel. Even if you think the car can drive itself, you're not going to really see the benefit of using these AI tools either in journey mapping or forecasting or actually building your product unless you pay attention and watch what it's doing step by step and course correct it when it goes off. Even the best LLMs tend to, they'll make a mistake once every 20 tool calls or once every 20 questions. And one mistake in 20 questions can absolutely kill your business. So Karen is asking multiple companies owned by several individuals that need to be tracked. That's probably easier to do with a spreadsheet rather than an LLM, frankly. So if you just need to track that, I would just use a spreadsheet, honestly. You could use the LLM to help you construct that spreadsheet and tell you how to track it over time, but I would absolutely just use the spreadsheet for that. Um, However, you could also use an LLM or a tool like this to take your customer journey map, right? To take that simple map that you built and actually construct a financial model without ever even touching a spreadsheet. And that becomes really, really cool all of a sudden, because instead of having to deal with some spreadsheets, and this is where this might be useful for you, Karen, um, you can actually, instead of just creating a point prediction here and having to do some manual analysis of kind of what if, you can actually use these modern tools that are coming out very, very quickly these days to calculate the probability of success or loss. In this case, I can calculate if I want to make, $10,000 a month. I can see that I have a very good chance of success with this particular business based on my inputs. Um, Still pretty good chance of $20,000. But if I want $40,000 per month, at least in the next 10 months, there's a very, very low chance of success. So this becomes really, really cool and very, very interesting very, very quickly. So tools like this, tools like Cursor are absolutely a godsend for how to develop new business models, how to project whether or not they're going to be successful in terms of lives saved or anything like that very, very quickly. In fact, we've done some research in the past 4 months and found that AI is actually far better than human beings at this point at making estimations. So if you're at day 0 and you're trying to get to an MVP and you're trying to estimate, well, what percentage of people do I think will convert from my landing page into a paying customer? Human beings, even when prompted well and trained, tend to be wildly overconfident with their predictions. We've actually found that GPT 4.1 is extremely good at this. O1 is pretty much indistinguishably good as well. They're very, very good at trying to estimate numbers, even in business contexts. We found these different models have different strengths. Most of them are better at predicting your local sports scores than they are at business metrics. But again, they are very, very good at business stuff too. So where even if you ask an LLM just off the shelf, if you prompt it well and ask it, what's Apple's stock price going to be in 2026, it's more likely to be accurate than most human beings. So I just plowed through a tremendous amount of stuff very, very quickly. I know that was a lot. I'm going to pause here. I haven't seen any other questions in the chat, so I'm gonna stop here and just try and wrap it up with a couple simple points. First of all, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm available on LinkedIn. As I said, I'm very happy to help early stage startup, as Christopher mentioned. If you have questions and I can be of help, I'm very happy to as part of supporting the ecosystem of new technology and new products worldwide. Please just feel free to reach out. Secondly, you can use any of the tools and templates that I've mentioned here. You can go to beta.kromatic.com, and there's a whole platform of 350 different tools and products that you can use to help develop your MVP. And lastly, if you want to get into real forecasting or journey mapping, you can use that last tool that I just showed, crowbar.ai. That is coming out in beta in the next 2 weeks. And again, if you're a startup, you can try and use that. Just email me and I'll give it to you for free. So I hope that helps. I'm going to pass it back over to Christopher. If you have any other questions, now's a great time to ask them.
Tristan, thank you so much for the journey map, the whole MVP process. Very, very informative, and with the KPIs. Again, we highly encourage everybody to reach out to Tristan. I know we have a lot. We have some thank yous here. We have a Doug Skinner that said thank you, and again, Karen, thank you for your questions. If anybody is gun shy here and wants to ask a question later to Tristan, please reach out to him. A wealth of knowledge that can only help you where you're at move forward. I know, Tristan, we have to bring on Anna from Glorium, if that's
Please,
okay. I
of
want to thank
course.
you again for being here and just a wonderful presentation today.
Well, thank you very much. And definitely everyone stay tuned. And it's very important for you to understand how AI can help you, but also how you can use these new tools and these new approaches to interact with a good development company if you're having trouble getting your MVP actually built. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you. And everybody, we want to bring on the VP, Anna Voznala from Glorium Technologies. She's going to be sharing the service MVP for Glorium Technologies here. And Anna, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Hi, Christopher. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you. Let me take a few minutes to actually share some thoughts after like 15 plus years during which Glorium's been building number of MVPs and launch them to market, process them into product growth, and handling them in different phases. There are like few points that are important to our opinion to know for all the people, business owners, those with ideas who want to bring MVP. And understanding of what MVP really is and why it's important to think and plan beforehand, before building, before the real development is going to start, on what this MVP is supposed to bring to the market, to the users, to the potential investors. That's like mandatory and highly underestimated step. And I want to emphasize it over here. Like, let's imagine there is an idea of a product to go to market to deal with a number of potential users that's supposed to validate this MVP, right? Like, and there's a limited amount of time and budget for this MVP to take place and to validate the market, right? So what MVP is a tool, is a minimum viable version of the product to validate the resonance with the market of the future potential product. This is first. It's important to understand. But this is something built. This is something already clarified and developed, ready to go to market and ready for users to go ahead and process, ready for moving forward and bring more investment, ready for growing as the solid product. This is not something that anybody can just quickly build, hop into production. This is not how it really works if we want to bring the value out of this MVP afterwards. So why we suggest different approach here in Glorium based on those 15 years, these different experiences bringing those MVP, why we suggest to think through the plan first is to not go ahead and actually be disappointed once MVP is built already. And what are the solutions? What are the valuable steps to not be missed prior to that? Well, planning, right? Planning and strategy, and bringing maybe a clickable prototype, bringing something feasible for the particular group of investors or users for test before the development even gets started. Validate the idea on the market before the development is already in progress, because afterwards that's time and budget. And the suggestion over here is to plan how it's going to be allocated way before the work is in progress. That's the point. So now, particular steps on how to do that. Well, planning goes starting from the very brief idea, breaking it down into feasible development pieces, particular clear requirements to the product towards the market fit, towards what MVP is to achieve for the business of particular business owner in need of building something. How to shorten the time period and budget allocation to actually bring the market results. Bring clickable prototype, bring particular requirements, bring the architecture planning, bring something small and feasible within a couple of weeks, and that's what we do in Glorium. That someone can click through and bring early feedback to the business owner before the development starts. So plan first and go for the development afterwards. We can see a lot of resistance towards such an approach because it's like, what's the value in that? Well, from the very beginning, the value might seem less rather than in progress of the development. There are risks that might have been planned thoroughly to not deal with them afterwards and go back to planning when we are somewhere inside of the development process already. To not go back and forth, not waste time and budget. Let's bring something small from the very beginning, clickable prototype, requirements, architecture, some clarity for potential investors or for users to bring early feedback before the development starts. See what I mean? And such approach, it actually allows to clarify the idea and bring early investment and actually get user feedback that might have been not that clear initially before the development started. And that's exactly why the planning is supposed to go prior to any development. And MVP is not an exception. That's pretty much how we work at Glorium, and this is how the MVP that we bring past early market validation, brings extra investment, and have thorough planning afterwards, leading to proper and smooth risk-free development with success in the market. Most efforts to be allocated in planning phase lead to further not wasting of time and budget on the MVP stage with like increasing opportunities for this MVP to go for the never-ending product growth and revenue for the business. That's what we target for with our clients, and this is what we think is reasonable to follow as a framework, as particular steps before the development and during the process of it. Like that. I think we're running out of time, so thank you. Let's make a pause over here.
Thank you, Anna. Very informative. Thank you for sharing, and just a wonderful overview today of MVP overall. We hope everyone received immense value. I know I did personally, being involved in startups throughout my career over the last 30 years. And again, we want to thank those that were with us throughout the entire duration. And thanks for those that did address questions, because not only does it help you, but it helps others that are on here. We want to let everybody know, again, if you received value, please leave us a comment. Also, any comments on LinkedIn would be much appreciated. And we'll be coming back soon with another webinar, including another virtual event that will be coming soon here from Glorium Technologies, as we are committed to your success in these areas. And again, thank you for everybody's time today, and we'll see you on the next webinar.